Hi, everyone. We're just going to give a few minutes to see if other people are interested in joining the conversation. So we'll start in a couple of minutes. If you know of other people who might be interested in joining this conversation, please feel free to ping them in so that they can enjoy the conversation as well. We'll start shortly. Thank you. So, hi everyone. I guess we'll get started just to be respectful of everyone's time. And just to begin the conversation. So, welcome. My name is Alexa Barrera. I'm a Mexican Canadian. I live in Canada right now. And I've decided to start this group under the Amigos club to talk about parenting in Spanish, first generation raising second generation. I grew up in Mexico in a bilingual and bicultural family. My mom is Canadian and my dad is Mexican. And now live in Canada, and I've got two little girls that I'm trying to raise as bilingual. So bilingualism has become very much something that I am very passionate about, and something that I would like to share, and so on. And so, if you go onto my Instagram account, you'll find a lot of different helpful resources, some tips and some tricks on how to navigate this journey of bilingualism. And so, for today's session, really, I just wanted to, leave it open, have people come on stage, talk a little bit about what their bilingual journey is like, the challenges that they're facing, and see if maybe together as a group, as a community, we can find some answers and some solutions for people. I'm hoping that this room will become one that we can do frequently, and that there is interest in continuing to do so. So before I let people up on stage to share their journey with us. If there are people that you think might benefit from joining the conversation today, please feel free to ping them. Clubhouse has changed a little bit since the last time I used it, but I believe if you go at the bottom next to the scissors, there's like a little arrow and it says invite people, and then I believe that you can ping people into the room. So feel free to do that if you know of someone who might benefit from doing that. At the same time, I invite you to go and see my profile, and if you like it, to follow me, just so that the uh, what's it called, algorithm of Clubhouse will let you know when we have future events. And one last thing, if you are not yet following the Amigos Club, make sure to hit that little greenhouse that you see at the top, so that you don't miss out on different clubs or so different rooms that are held. There's a number of different rooms on a number of different topics, and it's a very, very lively, vibrant, welcoming community. So I'll leave it at that. I see that there's one person that's put up their hand, Miss Romolini, and so I'm not really sure how to, hold on just a second, I'm trying to figure this out. Invite you to speak. There you go. If you'd like to join on stage, welcome.
Hey, how are you?
Good, thanks. Is there something that you wanted to share with us today on your bilingual journey or on raising bilingual kids?
I got cut off. Got cut off for a second.
Would you? Oh, would you? Do you have any questions regarding parenting in Spanish, or, we lost her? Okay, so I guess we'll. Oh, there you are.
Hello?
Sorry about that. Yeah, you're still there. Is there something that
Yeah.
would you like to share with us?
Yeah, so I just saw the title and stuff and just I guess like from my own experience being like my parents were immigrants and stuff from Mexico. I grew up in a like Spanish speaking home. Um I guess it's important to continue the tradition. It's a lot harder when it's like kind of like a mixed cultural family. Um, and they say every generation kind of loses a little bit of the previous generation. Um, so that's why like it really depends on how much immersion you give kids and stuff. When I was growing up, the child of immigrants, I saw a lot of variety in, people. Like I had classmates whose parents did not speak Spanish to them at home. They wanted them to learn, you know, English and English, because they wanted them to, kind of assimilate faster and stuff. And then there's other ones. Those were only a few. I think I saw them more when I was getting older. Um, but I mean, for one of the important things is like depending on what language you're teaching your child, like reading and writing are just as important as speaking. And it really does help kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together, and it really helps later on in terms of learning other languages. I know children can learn many languages, like multiple languages when they're young. And it's good to, like, you can teach kids like many languages at once and stuff. So because I think they're like, their brains are like, the younger they are, like their brains are like little sponges. So I think it's a good thing, but you have to really like dedicate a lot of time to it, because like if you're the child of immigrants and it's just comes naturally, like the foods and the traditions and things that you practice and stuff. But if you're already assimilated into another culture like America, like it's or any other country, it's going to be a lot harder to bring those traditions out. I think like over time people just kind of get a little bit more laissez-faire about it, so it's harder to kind of bring those traditions out, but it's possible. I'm done speaking.
Thanks for sharing that with us. Yeah, I agree with what you say. Really resonates for sure. Are there some traditions that you practice now that are some traditions that were passed on from your parents?
Traditions that I practice now, I mean, to be honest, it's a lot harder because a lot of the traditions um had to do with like get-togethers with family and things like that, like making certain foods, like things that I don't really cook like as much. But I love eating the foods and stuff like that. So it's harder because like, like I didn't have a whole lot of like I was exposed to it, but I didn't like I'm not like super like, like I don't know, I don't have the capacities in many ways. Like I don't like cook like the right foods that I kind of grew up eating and stuff. And when you're not around family and stuff, you don't get exposed to it. Also there's like traditions that kind of get, celebrated like El Dia de los Reyes, which is something that, is normally celebrated in a lot of like Latin American countries, and like it's not so much celebrated here. So, like I've tried to kind of hold on to that, and I buy the rosca or whatever. And things like that, just a lot of foods and things like that. But all traditions will vary, I think, based on the country that people are from. So, what about you?
Yeah, totally. That's cool. That's cool when you said Los Reyes, because I always remember El Dia de los Reyes is such an important um, moment in Mexican culture. Cuando vienen los Reyes y no Santa Claus, right? And so um, yeah, so for me, growing up in Mexico with a mom that's Canadian, we celebrated a lot of the Canadian festivities. So Easter and Thanksgiving in October, not Thanksgiving in November like you guys do in the US, and a whole bunch of different uh, festivities of that sort. And then we also did all of the Mexican ones, and so I really was exposed to both, which I think it was really smart of my mom, because it really allowed me to not just know that I spoke English, but also just feel that I did have that Canadian heritage as well. And so that was really great. And then with my girls, with the niñas, now what we do is um, we've picked what celebrations we want to do, right? And so, for example, El Dia de los Muertos was not something that we celebrated in Mexico City, and not something that we celebrated when I was growing up, but it's something that we do here at home. And so we set up our altar de muertos. My husband, who is not Latin American, shares the pictures of his grandparents, and of his family members that they want to put it on the altar. And so we do it a bit of a joint type of thing. And so that's turned out to be quite nice, because we've basically taken some of those cultural elements and adapted them to our family as needed. And I think that's such an important part to do, especially when you're raising bilingual kids, because it's important for them to know where they come from, and then it also gives you a good excuse to practice the Spanish. It gives you a good excuse to for them to see why it is that the Spanish is so important, right? I get a lot of pushback from my 5-year-old. This morning, she was like, "Don't talk to me in Spanish. I don't understand what you're saying." And I'm like, "No, you do understand what I'm saying. Si entiendes lo que te estoy diciendo. It's just easier in English, right?" And so, celebrating those little cultural moments throughout the year, I think really help solidify that part of not just the bilingualism but also the bicultural aspect of that as well. Um,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, now, like, for example, we have like the Mother's Day coming up. And like growing up, it was always like celebrating, El Dia de las Madres, like on the day that, they celebrated in Mexico. And they just kind of ignored like the American, the American day. So like growing up, I remember it was like that. Like he basically like El Dia de las Madres was always like the 10th or something like that of May. And, um, and then like the Mother's Day kind of falls on like a different, it's like on a Sunday or some sort of a a weekend or something like that. I don't know. I don't even know exactly. Um, but yeah, it was always about like just celebrating on El Dia de las Madres, It was like kind of how we grew up over, and actually um the celebrating El Dia de los Muertos, um my family didn't really celebrate it like the way that other families celebrate it. So I don't know. I think it just depends. It's like a regional thing. Like it depends on, where kind of like how your family grew up or whatever. I know that there's a lot of like indigenous origins to the Dia de los Muertos. A lot of the natives and stuff, they really there was really an appreciation for like death and how they kind of looked at death, not like death as the end, but basically a continuation and of life and stuff. And so it really had to do with a lot of that.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting that you bring that up because I grew up in Mexico City, and in Mexico City, it was not El Dia de los Muertos was not necessarily like a festivity that was widely celebrated. My dad is from the northern part of Mexico, and the northern part of Mexico has there are some indigenous communities, but there's a lot less of them compared to the southern part of Mexico, which is where the tradition and the origin of El Dia de los Muertos comes from. And the communities in the southern part of Mexico do have these big celebrations. I mean, it's a terrible comparison, but like for those who have seen the movie Coco, you can relate, right? So it's very like it's very much like what you see in that movie. And so but that was definitely not something that we grew up with. And in the northern part of Mexico, like my Mexican family that's from Tamaulipas, they never the Dia de los Muertos was not something that was ever even talked about because it was never something that was celebrated. So it's interesting to see all of these little uh, regionalizations, I guess you would say, of different parts of culture, right? And how much you decide as a parent what it is that you want to adapt and share with your child, and which ones you don't. Like I mentioned before, my family didn't celebrate the Dia de los Muertos, but we do now, even though we live in Canada and in Ontario, and there's quite a few Mexicans here, but we do our own thing, and we do set up our altar de muertos, and it's a really important, I think, event for us, for our family, and a tradition that I would definitely like to continue. Again, because it just solidifies a little bit about where they come from, and where the grandparents live, where abuelo and grandma live, and where eventually they haven't had we haven't had the chance to go to Mexico, but where they they eventually go and visit and get to learn more. I see some new faces in the audience, and so I'm just going to reset the room. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexa Barrera. I'm a Mexican Canadian. I grew up in Mexico. I'm now living in Canada, and I've got two young girls. Bilingualism has become very much a passion of mine over the last 5 years since I started raising my little girl, my two little girls, sorry. And I had decided to set up this room on parenting in Spanish because there are it is so difficult to do. Just to be honest, like having the first generation raising the second generation, it is not easy to do, especially when you can switch back and forth, MS can do between Spanish and English. It is so difficult to be able to raise kids in Spanish. And so I just wanted to set up a room to be able to find the comfort of other parents, share our stories, and try to find solutions and best practices, tips, and tricks that have worked for you in this bilingual journey of parenting, which I have mentioned in the past is more of a marathon than anything else. And so I hope that if you feel inclined to put up your hand and come and join us up on stage and share your story and ask your questions, please feel free to do so. As we continue on with the conversation, I thought that perhaps today I could share a couple of ideas on some of the most common mistakes that we do when we do our bilingual raising bilingual kids, and hopefully these tips that I'll be sharing with you throughout the hour will help you in your bilingual journey. If you haven't done so, I invite you to check out my profile and follow me. Check out my Instagram account, where I do funny reels, because I like to be ridiculous. And I share different resources and tips on just parenting in general, but mostly parenting bilingual kids. Today we're talking specifically English, Spanish, and in another room, perhaps another time, I will tell you the story about how we sent our 5-year-old into school in French. So she will now be a trilingual child. Again, as I mentioned, if you guys want to put up your hand, come up on stage and share your story or ask some questions, feel free to do so. If not, thank you for joining me and for spending the time here. If you know of other parents that might benefit from this conversation, feel free to ping them in. Yeah. So one of the most common mistakes I think that we do in bilingual parenting, and this is definitely one that I am very, very guilty of doing, is that I translate everything. And so every time that I catch myself speaking in English, and I know that I'm supposed to be speaking in Spanish, I'll translate. Or I'll say something in Spanish, and then my child will kind of look at me a little bit puzzled, and then I'll translate it into English. And I know I'm not supposed to do that.
Can I
Um,
ask, sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but
yeah, no,
how
go
is
ahead,
it
go ahead.
that I'm not really sure, like how do you actually go about, what's your process that you go about in like teaching your kids or living in a bilingual home?
Oh, that's a really good question, actually. That's a really good point. So there's, families are composed of different different ways. Our family household, my husband is monolingual, he only speaks English, and I am trilingual. And so in raising our kids, we've decided to go with the one parent one language method. There's different methods, that's one of them. There's minority languages at home, where both parents speak the minority language in their household. And there's, for example, another one called time and place, where you decide on a specific place and you speak that specific language. That works really well when there's multiple languages in the household. So we've decided to go with the one parent, one language approach, where basically you only speak your language to your child. So in theory, my husband will only speak English to my child, to the girls, and I will only speak Spanish to the girls. The problem arises when it is very easy to switch back and forth between languages. And when, for example, myself, I grew up in a household where there was no dominant language. We spoke in English with mom and in Spanish with dad. And so it's very easy for me to switch back and forth. And so I have to remind myself constantly to go back to the Spanish, so that I can fulfill that part of the one parent, one language. And so in a day to day scenario, it just looks like me talking to my kid in Spanish and telling her to brush her teeth, get ready, put her shoes on, um, go out the door, etc., all in Spanish. And my husband just speaks to them in English. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It's so basically it's like it's not actually it's not too complicated. So like but when you speak to your husband it's going to be in English, right? Because
That's right.
then yeah, okay, I
Yeah,
understand. I understand.
yeah.
Yeah,
And so
that's good.
yeah, and so it's yeah, and in theory it should be like quite straightforward and quite simple. If if you have one more dominant language, it makes it a lot easier to do, because thinking in the other language might be a little bit more difficult. And so I see that with some other Spanish speaking families where they learned English way later in life, and so Spanish is very, very much the dominant language. It's a lot easier for them in that sense, but it is tricky because we had to have a number of conversations as a couple, my husband and I, so that we made sure that neither one of us felt left out of the conversation, right? Because I didn't want him to feel left out just because I was speaking in Spanish to the girls, because he doesn't understand it. And so it was very important that we were on the same page. So yeah, so anyway, so that's pretty much the approach that we've taken. Again, like there's a number of different methods. Those are the three principal ones, and the one that we use at home is a one parent, one language. I want to welcome Miguel to the stage, and just wondering, Miguel, if you wanted to share a little bit about yourself, about your parenting, if you are raising kids in Spanish. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hi, I'm Dominican. My parents were immigrants. I was like first generation American here. They only spoke Spanish, so they let me learn English from school or from TV. Um, I think in English, I speak in English, I feel more comfortable in English, pero puedo hablar español bien, sin problema. Um, it's just that with kids, I noticed that as parents, when we're speaking to them, we always default to English. And I can see like it's not just me, it's the friends that I have who have kids, their kids don't know Spanish, even though they might have two Spanish speaking parents. Because the tendency is always, hey, you're in America, it's just easy to speak it, like some of my friends, it's like even though both parents speak Spanish, they just refrain to use that with either their elders or their other family members instead of their kids. Um, I think it's just like it's a lot harder now to do it because everything is not like it's just so easy to default to English. It's not like you can say, hey, you're trying to explain something in Spanish like your parents would, and they didn't have the option. Now you just fall back to English automatically. So I think that's the issue. But I think in a funny way, it's almost part of assimilation as well.
Oh my.
Yeah, for sure. I had the same problem. It had the same experience. Like the first three of us in our family, like we were. It was all Spanish at home, and then like the other three in the family, like they just spoke to my parents like in English. Like they would talk to them in Spanish, and they would respond in English because that's what they were more comfortable with. But I think at the same time, like it just, I guess later on it really does. the person a disservice, because I mean, it's like then you don't have the advantage of, getting a scholarship or learning other languages much easier, because you if you can speak a foreign language, you're able to learn other languages much more easy. And so I think that's like, really a personal choice. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Miguel, you touch on like a number of different things that are like very close to my heart. So, um, yes, that is exactly the same boat that I found myself in, constantly defaulting to English because there were very, very few people around me that spoke Spanish. English is the dominant language, and if there is another language that I hear in my community, it's French because this is a country that has two national languages, and so it was really, really difficult. I think it's important to kind of like uh, understand that for some parents they don't see the value in teaching another language to their child, and that's fine. I think that should be respected. It's at the end of the day, we all go through our parenting journey deciding what we believe is best for our families, right? And so if that's an approach to take, that's fine. But I also think that in our communities of Latinos, we don't really do a good job of supporting new parents and encouraging them to speak in Spanish and speaking in Spanish. I think that there's and this was very, very much my mistake when I first had Evelyn, that I just assumed that because I was bilingual, my kid was going to be bilingual too. Like, how hard could it be? I was raised bilingual. I spoke both languages perfectly. Like, it's not that hard. And it turns out it was really, really difficult. As soon as I went back to work for maternity leave, everything was in English, and the Spanish just slowly disappeared from our lives. And it wasn't until I had my second child that I decided that I needed to do something about it, because it was really important to me that my child be able to communicate with our Mexican family in Spanish. And so different parents might have like different reasons of why they want to they want to have their kid learn another language, right? For us it's that. And so I think it's really important to really find the motivation of what it is that you what the reason behind why you want to teach your child the Spanish, but also um, just acknowledge the fact that we need to support each other by sharing information, by sharing, for example, the importance of having a family language plan before your child is even born. This is so essential because it will set you up for success, right? It'll allow for you to be better prepared and to not find those challenges, or to be able to navigate those challenges in a way easier way. So you were gonna say something?
I was gonna say, um, when I was younger, I never saw the value of it, like knowing both languages. But now that I'm older, when most people see me, they don't assume I can speak Spanish. They just think I speak English because I speak it so well. And it's funny to see their expression when you start speaking Spanish to them, because they're like it's a eureka moment, and they're like, "Oh my God, like you could talk the same language." As for my kids, I feel bad because it's like I feel like you're excluding part of the culture by not giving them the language. Like you were saying, like, what's the reason for them to talk? I remember I have a friend. His wife is, well, his ex is Puerto Rican. He's Dominican, and he needed to translate to speak with his son to his grandmother in Spanish. And I said, dude, you just have like a total disconnect between your son and his grandmother. It's like if you're not in the room, there's no communication. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I think it's a lot more than just the language. I think it's like the music you listen to, the TV shows that you watch. It's the immersion in culture. It's not to say that you can't do it without the language. It's just that it's a huge barrier when you don't.
Yes, and the language is very much the conduit to all, to sharing all of that, right? To sharing the culture, to sharing, you know, your favorite books that you were reading when you were growing up, the TV shows that you were watching, and all of the other yeah, things is very the language is very much the conduit, and it's just so important just to, like, you know, equip parents with knowing that, you know, there are options, and it is possible to do. Can I ask, Miguel, how old are your kids now?
My kids are my two oldest ones are in their 20s, and I got a teenager. She's 15, and a 12-year-old.
Oh my goodness, you're so busy.
Not not really.
Oh, okay, well, that's good. And
I mean, let me ask, so is their mom like, are they
No,
like
they're
Spanish
Latina. They're
speaking,
Latina. They're
or
both Latina. Yeah, one's
so they
Colombian, and the other Salvadorian.
so they
But they all default to English.
so they're are they like they were born here like in the US, and then
No, no,
like
no,
they
no.
came, their
The one of
families.
them was born here because she was Puerto Rican, and then like Puerto Rican and Colombian, and the other one was born in El Salvador. So it's like the not speaking Spanish is a choice, more or less. Not that she
Yeah.
doesn't know.
Yeah,
My
like
only thing,
they say that, it's usually the strongest, like the language that you learn is gonna be like the language that your mother spoke to you, because it's the mother tongue. And that's why they call it the mother tongue. So whatever language your mother spoke to you in is the language that's gonna stick with you, the most.
I mean,
Not
with
necessarily, all the time, but in many times it is.
I mean, with me and my friends, like, cause I got a friend who's an immigrant as well. We both speak English. Everything we do is in English. I mean, we'll say a couple words in Spanish, but we think in English, and it changes everything. And I remember, there's an ease of use. Like, someone told me, you know what language you speak in when you start cursing or when you make love, that you just revert to it. Italians, like, they might just start cursing at you in Italian, even though they know English. But the thing that I find funny, I said, look, it language is a bridge. Because where I work, I find a lot of different Hispanics who don't think I can speak the language. And then when I start translating, it's almost like you could see the wonderment in their eyes, and they're like, "Oh, where you come from? Where this? Where did you learn the language? And how can you speak it so well?" And a lot of times, even like in situations that are labor related, I can always articulate their point of view to management and vice versa. And it's like I feel like sometimes like we do a disservice to our kids, because even though you have the label of Latino, you don't have the language down. And it seems like to the people who come from those countries, like Spanish speaking countries, they don't see you as a real Latino if you don't speak the language.
Yeah, it totally creates a very much ni de aquí ni de allá scenario, um, and
Yeah.
that's harsh. That's definitely
Um,
challenging.
Alexa, I have a question. So, how is the whole culture like up in the area where you're living in, as far as like, because I know that Canada, like, they speak English and also French, and in some colonies, they don't even acknowledge you if you don't speak French to them. Like, it's very much like a certain, like, exclusivity to the community. Like, they just want you to speak French, and everybody else is like, below them. Do I have it wrong, or can you please enlighten me on it?
um, no, I mean, you know, like in any country, you will find the extremes. But The official languages in Canada are English and French. Most of the country speaks English. Quebec, the province of Quebec, predominantly speaks French. Um, it's, they tend to frown upon you not speaking French. But the other reality that I think, as country we have is that we're very much a country of immigrants. Um, the U.S. is as well, but our country's a lot smaller, and so you can see it. It's a lot more visible. I feel, and so every year there's 400,000 new Canadians that arrive to Canada, and so they come from all over the place. And so those diaspora communities are very strong. They very much group and are together, and so that really helps, I think, solidify a little bit of that pushback, Miguel, that you talked about, the assimilation part of things. To just say, okay, yes, we're in Canada and we're Canadian, but we're going to keep, these parts of our culture, these parts of our tradition, these parts of our religion, and so it's a little bit different in that sense. And I feel in general, and maybe it's because I live in the capital and where it's a lot more open here. It might be different in different parts of the country, but I feel in general, like, people are very respectful of where you come from. And for example, as an example, my daughter goes to the French Catholic School Board, and the English School Board here in Ottawa offers Saturday language school, and so they have over probably 40 different types of languages that they teach on Saturdays to kids, so that they can maintain their native language, or their language of their heritage. So it goes from everything from German to Tamil to Spanish to whatever. Like, it's all there, and so that's really, I think that's really much for me, that really shows that, as a society, we have acknowledged here in Canada the importance of having multiple languages and supporting children and keeping those languages that are being spoken at home, as well. So I don't know if that kind of like clarifies a little bit for you. I have noticed that for the schooling system specifically, it's very, that part is very, very different. It's very supportive. Um, Very encouraged for your kid to be bilingual, English French, and then the support of a third language on Saturdays if you choose to do so.
Yeah, that's super important, I think, because I mean, I growing up, I had that privilege of, being able to. I don't know what exactly was going on with my school. It's a public school, but they had like a sort of an immersion program where certain classes were being taught by a bilingual teacher. And so early on, like when I was like 6 or 7, I started learning how to read and write in Spanish. And that wasn't the case for other students within that same school. So I think that program got so popular that eventually it became like the whole school became like an Adelante like program, like immersion school. Like it was just something, and it got bought out and they changed it. But it was really like the building blocks. Like I didn't have a whole lot of learning, but what I learned to read and write at that point stuck with me like for like up until this point. Like so I think even if it's just a little bit of learning on it, that's really like important, and it really makes you like visualize like what it is you're saying and how it's written and things like that. And even now I'm not that great at like the accents and all that stuff, and like I'm like, does this one have an accent? I forget. But yeah, for sure, like it was definitely helpful.
Thanks so much for sharing that. We talked at the beginning about the different methods that you can use for raising a bilingual child. So the one parent, one language, the minority language at home, and then the time and place. Um, but the second part that I find is really, really important to this, is the commitment level that's required from the parent to teach the Spanish language, right? So it's one thing to have your child just understand the Spanish. It's a different commitment level to have your child reply to you in Spanish and actually like talk in Spanish. And then it's a way bigger commitment to have your child be able to read and write in Spanish, right? Because that really solidifies the language, and it requires a lot of commitment, a lot of resources, a lot of outsourcing to try to find that. So I'm glad that you brought that point forward, because as we go through our bilingual journey, it's really important to acknowledge like what is the level of commitment that you want, like what is it exactly that you're trying to achieve, because it will require much more effort. I want to just reset the room quickly. It's 9:45. This room will go until 10 o'clock because I'm old and I have to go to bed. But I'm very much enjoying this conversation, and I want to just kind of like reset the room. My name is Alexa Barrera. I'm a Mexican Canadian raising bilingual girls in English and Spanish. Very much passionate about this subject and trying to support parents in their bilingual journey. This room is being hosted under the Amigos Club. So if you're not part of the Amigos Club yet, make sure to follow so that you can see other types of groups that are rooms that are being created, which with really interesting topics. A very, very welcoming community, and I'm hoping that I can do this room, once a week or once every 2 weeks, to continue on this conversation with parents that are in the same boat as me, trying to survive and navigate parenting and in Spanish. So welcome, Ale. Would you like to introduce yourself, and do you have a question for the group?
Hi, Alexa. Good night, everybody. It's actually almost 10 where I'm at, but I so yeah, my name's Ale. I live in Miami, Florida, and it's a blessing living in Miami, because I feel like here in Miami, in order to be successful in your career or professionally, you have to be bilingual. You have no choice. You're either bilingual English Haitian or bilingual English Spanish. I live in an area where if you don't speak Spanish, you will not survive, honestly. It's a prominent Caribbean, Cuban, Puerto Rican, Dominican, and from the time my son was born, he spoke Spanish first. Um, he's fully bilingual because he's learned English from the iPad and from his cousins, from his friends. But in my home, it is only Spanish. And if he answers me in English, I tell him, no te entiendo, háblame en español. And also, the daycare where he's been at since he was a baby, the ladies there, they don't even speak English, which I love. I love it because he's all day at daycare speaking Spanish. So in that sense, I think I'm very blessed for where I live, and the fact that it's been very extremely easy for us to raise and have Arsenio. He's 4. The hola. Hola. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's 4 years old and fully bilingual. Thank God.
Well, I can tell you I'm very, very jealous. That's for sure. But that's fantastic. Congratulations on that, because just you talk about being surrounded by people that speak in Spanish and so on, but it still requires a level of commitment and discipline on the parents' behalf, I think, too. And so that's really, really cool to hear that at 4 he's fully bilingual, because he won't ever lose that. And it is such a gift. I think Miguel talked about it earlier when he was saying that when he was younger, you said, Miguel, you never really saw the value of speaking 2 languages, but now as a professional, as an adult, you do. And I think that's definitely that vision that we can give for our children, because they're not able to see why it is so important, but how it will become and become so important in the future. Um, you know, I spoke about how at the beginning about how I'm trilingual, and my parents could have never foreseen this, but my siblings and I learned French when we were younger, and 30 years later, my brother got offered a job at a university teaching in French. And they could have never foreseen that that opportunity was going to be there for him if he didn't speak French, right? So you really never know when you're going to have or make use of the languages, and so it's such an important tool to give to our kids, aside from all of the benefits of sharing all of the culture, and so on. So thanks, Ali, for sharing that. Ruben, hi, welcome to the group. Would you like to share your story?
I'm going to share my story in Spanish. Can I
Yes, of
share
course.
my story in
Yeah,
Spanish?
for sure.
Ok. Bueno, mi crianza de niño, ¿verdad? Lo que yo recuerdo, pues yo nací en el 88, en el año 88. Y recuerdo que mi papá, yo no puedo decir nada de malas palabras, obviamente correccionar con lo que es normal. Pero mi papá era muy estricto, me decía, hasta tal hora tienes que estar en casa, si no, te castigo. Si yo me castigaba con quitarme los videojuegos, o me acuerdo una vez que fui a la panadería a buscar un poco de leche, y yo recuerdo que me fui con la bicicleta, con la goma de la bicicleta media vacía, y recuerdo cuando el galón de leche llegó medio vacío, mi papá me dio con la correa en las piernas. Y me acuerdo que en la adolescencia me quitó privilegios y todo eso. Eso es parte de mi historia, ¿verdad? Y tengo una licenciatura en sociología y aquí estoy, gracias a Dios.
Bienvenido al grupo, y gracias por compartir tu historia. MS, did you want to say something? Sorry, I keep calling you MS because that's the name that I
Oh,
see,
you
but I
can
don't
just
know if
call me
that's like.
Miss. It's fine. Yeah.
Oh,
No, I
Miss.
was
Okay.
just saying,
Did you?
es increíble, es una historia de como muchos Latinos, where the family is like teaching them, how to, speak the language and stuff. So it's good. Oh, where'd he go? Is he gone?
Yeah. Yeah. I think he. Oh, there he is. Yeah, definitely. And I think, I think too. As you were telling your story, when I was just thinking about, um, all of the different experiences that we have as children when we're growing up, right? And we're growing up in another country, or we're growing up with parents that speak another language, and we just want to kind of like fit in, and there's all of these different emotions that we carry and that slowly build up to make us who we become as adults, right? And so it's so important to kind of like recognize that, and to sort out and really define why it is that we want to share our culture. And also, I find, for me, something that I came to realize not too long ago, actually, maybe like less than a year ago, because my daughter's really small and we're just starting talking it start to talk about really important issues like bullying and so on. And this is not necessarily maybe the part of like parenting in Spanish, but very much the part of parenting. Like, what part of my Mexican upbringing do I want to share with my child? Like, do I want to have the chanclazo culture, or do I want to have of a more respectful type of upbringing? And so, when we start to raise our children in Spanish, very very much some of those questions come up, right? And as parents, I feel I'm very grateful that we can make that choice. We can decide whether we want to share that part of the culture with our child, so that it can be passed on for one more generation or not. um, yeah, Miguel, did you have something to share?
Yeah, I was gonna say, me and my sister, we both did like a conscious decision not to hit our kids. Not to spank them, not to, abuse them. And it's funny because it was directly because of the way how stringent and how hard our mom was with us. We took that out of the raising of our kids, And I noticed that I have a much better relationship with my kids than my mom had with me at the same age. I noticed that it's almost like the movie, that Denzel was in. That he said, "It's up to you to take what's on the plate, and you're gonna leave what you're gonna leave on." And I noticed that with my sister, it even works even better because her son has autism, but he looks like at his parents like they're his best friends. It's not like a thing of, hey, you're afraid. Like he doesn't have to be afraid of who he is or what you say, because when we were growing up, you didn't even want to talk. You were supposed to be seen, not heard. So it's a lot different now the way we raise our kids, because now there's a two-way conversation. It's back and forth and it's respectful, but it doesn't have to come down to, hey, I don't like what you said, so I'm gonna hit you.
Yeah, no, totally. And um yeah, that's really nice to hear, Miguel, that conscious parenting, that conscious decision that you and your sister made earlier on, because I think the parenting in Spanish, it very much goes beyond the language. I find, the Spanish ends up being kind of like this conduit to a number of different things, right? And so when we talk about parenting in Spanish, there's a number of different issues or items that end up coming up as well, right? That we bring from our own upbringing or from our own culture or from what we experienced when we were younger. um, so there's a few new people here in the room. I just want to say hi to Dali, and thank her for encouraging me to start the Parenting in Spanish room. And so thank you so much for joining us tonight, Dali, as moderator. Did you have a moment to say hi?
Yes, and I'm so sorry I could not join earlier, but I'm happy to be here. Yeah, I can moderate.
Thanks. And so we talked about the different methods of bilingual parenting earlier on, the different methods that you can approach. We also talked about the importance of having a family language plan, right? Why it is that we want to share our language, and communicate our language, share our Spanish language with our children. And so I think that's something that's like really, really important. I briefly started talking about some of the errores, some of the mistakes, the most common mistakes in the crianza bilingüe, and one of them being the translating everything. So how translating everything is not necessarily the best approach, and it's the best approach is to just stick to the language and stick to the language that you speak. I like very much what Ale said about si me hablas en español no te entiendo. That is definitely a common response that we can use with my 5-year-old, who's been giving me a lot of pushback recently. She keeps telling me, I don't understand it yet. I have to speak the language better in order to understand what you're saying. And I have to keep reminding her, well, you have to practice the language in order to understand what I'm saying. So I'm going to say it again. And so, I know that she understands it. She doesn't speak back to me in English, but I know that the words are there. So I'm hoping that in the near future, the Spanish will come. And so before I continue on with, like, there's two other things that I wanted to share with you about raising kids in Spanish, and some of the mistakes that we can make. Well, did anyone maybe in the audience or up in the on stage want to share anything else before I carry on? Any questions or comments?
Alexa, I don't know if you've covered this, but is the
Hello.
majority of... Oh, go ahead.
Sí, okay, can I speak?
Go for it.
Sí,
Uh,
sí,
yeah.
yo voy a decirle es una parte que me acordé. Que me acordé en un momento dado que mi papá me crió con la cultura en cuanto deportiva se refiere, es que cada vez que jugaba a Puerto Rico en alguna disciplina internacional, de alguna disciplina de deporte, en alguna competencia internacional, irle siempre a Puerto Rico, a mi país, y el amor por la patria, por la poesía, y me llevaba el amor por la familia, las tradiciones familiares como la Navidad, especialmente lo que es el Día de Reyes Magos, que en Puerto Rico se celebra mucho, recoger mayormente lo hace con mi sobrina de 5 años, de recoger el pasto para ella y la cajita y eso, pues yo lo he observado mucho. Y eso es una de las cosas bien lindas que recuerdo, el amor por la patria y el respeto a los demás y el ayudar a los otros.
Gracias por compartir eso, Rubén. Definitivamente es tan parte importante de esta crianza bilingüe, la parte de la cultura, ¿no? ¿Qué parte de la cultura queremos compartir? Y como lo dices tú, el amor a la patria, por ejemplo, lo compartí yo hoy es 5 de mayo. We don't really celebrate that in Mexico because it is not our Independence Day, but I will take any opportunity to eat tacos and Mexican food, right? And so el poder compartir la cultura es tan importante de esa parte de la crianza bilingüe. Dali, did you want to share something with us?
Yeah, actually, algo de que dijo Rubén, de que uno le puede enseñar acerca del lenguaje a los hijos por medio de la cultura. Yo entrevisté a una señora bien maravillosa, es boricua. Ella tiene una caja de suscripción o a subscription box thing de actividades para niños para que aprendan de la cultura de Puerto Rico. Y ella va a expandirlo a otros países. Well, she's gonna eventually introduce new boxes that have activities to learn about new cultures. Si se dan cuenta, I struggle with my Spanish, so have some patience with me, please. Pero quería compartir eso porque creo de que es un buen recurso, especialmente para los niños chiquitos, de que quizás cuando, como mis hijas, cuando empezaron first grade, ellas notaron de que las trataban diferente y eso they were disinterested in speaking Spanish because they felt like they were being teased about it. Y fue hasta como ya muchos años después de que empezaron a interesarse otra vez de querer hablar el idioma. Así de que si pueden mantener ese entusiasmo cuando están chiquitos, como sea, hay que tratar, ¿verdad? So, en Instagram, la señora se llama, su account es We Are Rooted Box. Sí, solo quería compartir ese recurso. Gracias.
Thanks so much, Dali. Just as a note, this is a safe space. So if you want to switch back and forth, Spanish, English, judgment-free zone. And I love the We Are Rooted box is really cool. Like I follow her as well. And to have that resource available for people is so great, right? Because at the end of the day, you just kind of want to equip yourself with as much resources as possible to make the journey fun, right? And to make it interesting, so that they won't get discouraged, right? And so that they'll reach an age where they can feel proud of the language and of the activities, and don't see Spanish as a chore, I guess, is what I'll say. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that actually takes me to like the second point that I wanted to share on los errores más comunes en la crianza bilingüe, and it's like we correct all the time, el estar corrigiendo todo el tiempo. No, like we want our little kids we want them to fall in love with the language, right? We want them to have fun with the language. We want them to associate it with fun. And if all the time we're correcting them and we're telling them that's not how you say it, that's not how you do it, like it doesn't really make it a fun experience for them. And so something that I really like doing is cheering my child on. So anytime that she says something in Spanish, I'm like, yay, you did it, that's amazing. Even though it might be like a really lame word like today Penelope, who's almost 3, just kept saying palomitas. Everything was palomitas. And I just kept encouraging her and just was being like, oh, that's so great, that's amazing, and I find that like that really does end up making a big difference in how they perceive the language, as opposed to feeling it like it's like dreading it and feeling like it's a chore or a task.
Can I ask you,
Uh,
Alexa, were you congratulating her in English or Spanish?
You know what? Now that I'm telling the story, I can't remember, but that's a really good point. Like
I was
I'm pretty sure I was saying it in Spanish, but I might have been in my head saying it in Spanish, but saying it in actual English. That's a really good point. I'm gonna
I
have to
was
make a
just
note of that.
curious. I no reason behind it. I was just curious.
I was gonna tell you with Alexa, with the kids, the thing I remember about falling in love with the language was the music. Like they would have kids groups, menudo and stuff like that, and you would just get into the thing of singing the songs. The fun part was is like, you'd memorize the song without having to think, hey, I'm actually doing work to learn this. You just wanted to be in tune with the music. So it's almost a nice way of tricking your kids into learning Spanish.
Oh my gosh, 100%. And you said menudo, and the first thing that I thought was like, súbete a mi
Yeah.
moto.
Oh my gosh. That takes us back. Actually, eso es lo que hacen mis adolescentes. They take a lot of that, well, music from now. And una de ellas es más avanzada. La que está tomando clase de español no lo habla tan bien. La que se está enseñando ella solita con música y caricaturas y, no, well, con los shows, ella lo habla más y lo entiende más. Así de que it's incredible because you would think the one that's taking the Spanish classes in high school would be the one that's advanced, but it's all about, I guess, finding that fun way and dedicating yourself to practicing.
Yeah, and it's a living language too. That's the thing. You have fun with it. I mean, I think the thing with today that you have is you might not be in Mexico, but you could listen to Mexican radio stations with the internet, or vice versa, or watch shows. It doesn't have to be that you're limited to what's being offered in your country.
That's very true. In that sense, I'm very grateful um, for the internet. Like it's very that's very very true. And there are so many different resources, and even just the virtual some of the virtual classes that I've sent my girls up, like during the pandemic when things were really locked down here and we weren't able to get together with other families. We were able to find some Spanish speaking teachers and classes, and so that just made it much more available. But you're so right, and that the music is really, you know it's just such a beautiful thing in any language, and is definitely yeah, I'm making a note here to share those videos of Luis Miguel and Timbiriche from when I was growing up. I don't know if there's other Mexicans in the audience that might have like listened to those when they were growing up, but yeah, it's such an important thing. Um, I think I'm gonna just quickly just reset the room. Just to mention a couple of things. Thank you so much for being here in this room. Parenting in Spanish, first generation, raising second generation. Um, Bilingualism is very much a passion of mine. I'm raising my 2 girls to speak English and Spanish, living here in Canada. And through my Instagram account, I share a number of different resources, tips, and tricks, and then funny reels, because it's fun to be ridiculous once in a while. And on parenting and raising bilingual kids. So if you haven't checked out my Instagram account, please make sure to do that. If you are not part of the Amigos community, you can join by clicking the little green house at the top. It's a very welcoming community that has a number of different rooms on many different topics, and so I invite you to check it out as well. Um, uh, this is in discussion, but I'm trying to see if I can host this room on a weekly basis, to just provide a forum for parents to come and just share their experiences and their challenges. their successes, and so that we can celebrate them together on raising bilingual kids. If you would like to come up on stage and share your story, please just put up your hand, and we'll bring you up on stage. I said that I was going to end the room at 10, but I see a lot of like new faces, and so I don't know if maybe there's other people that want to share some stories, and I feel very energized by this conversation, so I feel like we can keep going for a little bit. Um so oh, and if you think, yeah, yes. And so the last thing that I wanted to share about, the los errores más comunes en la crianza bilingüe, and I think this is just something that we do in general, just as parents, is that we're constantly comparing our success to the success of other parents and how well they're doing. And I think that this is just like a big mistake in general, comparing yourself to others, because everyone has a different family situation. Everyone's living a different life. You don't know what obstacles other people are facing, or they don't know what you're facing as well. And so I think one of the things that I've really struggled with, and I'm trying to let go of, is comparing, how well my child is speaking in Spanish versus other children that are the same age, for example, living here in Canada. And so letting go of that, I think, is just something that's really important, because it'll also reduce the amount of stress that you're transmitting to your child when you want them to speak in Spanish, or when you're sharing that Spanish language. And anyway, so I just wanted to share those three things that, don't translate everything, don't correct your child all the time, and really encourage them when they're doing and saying different things in Spanish, and not compare your success in the Spanish language to others, as well. So I hope that those are some good little tidbits that you can take back with you in your raising, especially if you have little kids at home. I welcome any questions or comments, if anyone has any from the audience, or if anyone from the bottom wants to join us up on stage. Just feel free to put up your hand.
I would like to ask any tips about the sticking to one language, because as you see, I switch back and forth almost unconsciously, and in my family, it's my husband who speaks it as well. He's less able to stick to Spanish. Like before you know it, he's swapped back to English. So, are there any tips that you can give us to help us stick to it? Because that's part of the problem too, right? If we can't even stick to it, then how are we going to teach them?
Oh my gosh, yes. And this is very much like something that happened to me and happens to me all the time, especially like when you are so dominant in both languages. It's just so easy to kind of like go back and forth, and then you just forget that there was the other language. Something that I found really helpful, after I had my first child, so after Evelyn, when I came back from maternity leave, I went back to work in English, and the Spanish slowly started disappearing from our lives. I did a couple of things that kind of helped bring the Spanish more to life. And by doing that, it was just more present in my mind. And so it was a lot easier to be more conscious about it. So the first thing that I did is I put a whole bunch of signs all over the house that just said, Háblame en español. And so this was just kind of like a cue, as a reminder, a visual reminder of, oh yeah, I have to speak in Spanish. And so that I found was like quite helpful, because it was becoming very difficult to just remind myself on my own. And then the other thing that I found too is, the brain is a funny muscle. If you stop working one part of it, then it just kind of like becomes less wanting to work out, right? And so the other thing that I did is I started watching a lot more TV in Spanish, and listening to a lot more music in Spanish, and reading in Spanish. And that also helped, because that kind of programmed my brain to bring what I call bringing the Spanish to the forefront of your brain, so that it was a lot more present. So I don't know if that's helpful. Maybe Miguel has some other ideas.
No, I was gonna tell you, you're right on the watching TV or the listening to music, or even if it's just like podcasts in Spanish. I remember there was a time that I had like a roommate, and all he had was Spanish language books. And I remember at the time I would only read in English. And I think that once I started reading past the first book, it almost the language issue disappeared. It was just the content that I was worried about. I remember I would burn through his books like on a nightly basis. And it was just hard at the beginning. But what I was going to tell you was think in Spanish. Because usually when we're going to talk English, it's the first thing that you go to default. But I said, like, if you're going to speak Spanish, at least with me and my friends, what we just do, we'll just stick to that. Or if you're someone who doesn't speak English, you got to stay talking in Spanish. And it's like there's a tendency to want to go into Spanglish, go into your English, but you just stay rooted to the Spanish. And I think the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Miguel. The thinking in the language, and I think, the other thing that I'll say too is we have to kind of also be respectful of the event, like sorry, I'm just trying to figure out the way to say this, but like if you experience an event in a specific language, it's very difficult to explain it in another language. And so my mom was very good at that. For example, when we were growing up, even though she spoke to us in English constantly, we went to school and it was in Spanish. And so if something had happened at school in Spanish, we weren't going to tell her if we were going to have to translate it into English. And so she, recognized that. And so what she would just do is she would just say, like, tell me in Spanish, what is it that happened? She would continue to speak in English, but we would tell her in Spanish. And that really helped as well, because, if you live an experience, that, Juanito te quitó el juguete, to have to express what happened in another language, it just makes it really difficult. And then you end up just not wanting to say anything at all. And so sometimes, when we're talking, you might be to think then the language is one thing, but then when we're talking about expressing something that we might have lived or an experience or talk about our day, sometimes it might be a lot easier to default um, to that majority language, which in this case would be the English. Dali, what do you think about those tips?
I really like it. La música, I've got that because my girls, like I said, they've been doing really well with that. The the TV watching is gonna be challenging because I have already tried it and it feels so weird, almost uncomfortable because es tan rápido a veces, like the lenguaje, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I used to speak that fast, my Spanish. Why is it so hard now? But, like you said, like at work, with family, todo es en inglés. So, yeah,
I got a suggestion for that.
okay, I'm listening.
Okay, you know how when you buy a DVD, it has the languages on it. Let them watch something that they already know what the content is, and switch the language to Spanish.
Okay, yeah,
Because that way,
yeah. That's a good idea.
then
I'm asking for myself in this situation, but I'm gonna use that one with them too because
you,
What
you,
specifically are you talking about on TV, Dolly? I'm not sure.
oh, well, so I don't have cable, so I don't even know I have YouTube TV. I don't even know what to. No, I don't know what that. Yeah, I'm not a big TV watcher, so like I can't relate to some of the shows, which is part of the problem. Like the los dichos, because a lot of them are from. I'm
¿Cómo dice
Nicaragüense,
el
so it's
dicho?
really
¿Cómo dice el dicho?
well, I don't even know. I can't even remember them. That's why sometimes when I'm watching something, they're saying stuff and I'm like, I understand every word individually, but not as a phrase how they're putting it. So, like the meaning behind it.
Oh, like
So that makes
proverbs. Are you talking about like the proverbs? Like
no, just like common dichos from their culture.
yeah,
So
yeah, like proverbs, like proverbios, things el que quiere celeste que le cueste. Algo
oh
something
yeah,
like
yeah,
that, right?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like yeah. Yeah, I'm bad at those too.
Yeah. So
You just
so
have to
I
hear them, yeah.
right, or like at least slow it down, so that kind of makes me lose interest. So I mean, really, I'm understanding that I just have to stick with it, and the longer I listen, the better. But yeah, I'm gonna give that a try. Thank you, because I completely forget about this, so I'm always turning to here's la música, and then sometimes the books with my kids, and then sometimes I ask them like, let's watch this together, and then if I lose interest, I can totally understand why they lose interest too. So thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think the other suggestion that I would make is, especially like if the Spanish isn't very strong, your Spanish is strong, but like for other people in the audience, if your Spanish isn't very strong, sticking to the international Latin American language might be more helpful when you're watching TV. And what I mean by like international Latin American, like how like there's different accents. I guess I would say it like that.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
and so watching the telenovelas, not that I'm like promoting Televisa here or anything, but like there's specific telenovelas that they've been taped in a specific type of Spanish, so that they can be shared all over Latin America, and they're understood by everyone from from Peru to Chile to everywhere. So I'll send you a couple of like recommendations, especially on Netflix. I found that there has been some pretty good like productions. um, and I was gonna mention something else, but now I forgot. Um, yeah. So
Well, one thing I was gonna add, like, if I can just add, like, last thing,
yeah, of course.
um, so like, I think when it comes to like learning any language, like, you just have to be ready to like make mistakes and and just like speak slowly, be okay with making mistakes, and then just know that like if you were to take a class in like any foreign language, you would dedicate, let's say, an hour every day, 5 days a week, to that class, and then you would study for 2 to 3 hours and then get your units. Well, if you think about it, you can do that at home too while you're practicing Spanish. You can dedicate 1 hour at least a day, and then like, two hours or whatever on any other time, and just kind of like practice little by little. And I guess that can help as well, like, if you're learning a different language. So that's all I was gonna say.
Yeah, no, that's a really good tip. Um, and definitely something that would be helpful. I'm just reading the comments here. This is a new feature from Clubhouse that I like didn't really even know existed until last week. Where on the side you've got this like chat that you could also like participate in, and so Dali had talked about the "We Are Rooted" box. So it's there, and then I see Nayeli and Nidia had made a couple of comments, and um, Nydia mentions, as bilingual speakers, we do a lot of code switching in different languages based on social context. And Spanglish is a great example of our experience as bilingual speakers. And I really like that, really resonates with me. When I was growing up, my mom did not like you chose a language. It was either English or it was Spanish, but you could not like mix them up. And uh, now as a bilingual parent, um, I kind of have a different view about the code switching, right? Like you're not code switching because you're lazy and you don't know the language. You are just code switching because you lived a particular experience in one language, and then you're trying to like say another one, and express it in another language. And so I think that this is something that um, I don't know. I've seen a lot of like I've seen this a lot in like literature of languages in the last little while as I've been researching it more and more, and how it's more and more supported by just by people that speak, that are bilingual, because they understand that it's not that you're really being lazy and mixing both languages and doing the Spanglish. It's that you're really trying to express yourself by using those two languages all at once, and it's a better word to express it. Like a clear example, for example, of this is, for example, anyway, I have many examples, but I'm trying to bring someone up here on stage, and Nayeli, I can't seem to get her to come up. I don't know if it's maybe because, anyway, Nayeli, I think I'm trying to like let you come up here on stage if you want to come and join us. Um, uh, but what I was going to say about code switching, like there are some things that you say in certain languages that you can't say in others, right? So, for example, in Spanish, when you give birth, um, the language is dar a luz, for example, and then people will tell you, "Oh, ya te alivianaste," oh, you got better. But you can't really say that in English, but it's very much an expression in Spanish, and of the giving birth. And so anyway, so just to use an example of how it is that in Spanish there are some, or in English too, there are some things that are better expressed in that language. Anyway, I digress. I'll pass it on to Nayeli. Welcome to our room.
Hello, thank you so much for inviting me.
So, did you want to share a little bit about your story, or uh, what it is that you do, or did you have some questions for the group?
No, I just wanted to share, as a bilingual speaker, I do tend to sometimes I think my brain thinks in Spanish, and as I'm thinking in Spanish, I'm also trying to translate it into English when I'm speaking. So that's when I get a little stuck when speaking in public. So I do agree. Sometimes at home, I try to speak as much as Spanish as I can. And when I go to work, that's the only place that I speak English, just to continue speaking Spanish at home. Uh, when we see TV, we also try to switch the language to Spanish when it comes to music as well, just to continue with raising bilingual children, and the importance of raising bilingual children and all the benefits. It's great. So my priority is always to speak Spanish at home, and listen to music and watch anything in Spanish. But when we're out in the world, like socializing, we kind of tend to speak more English. So it's interesting to see your guys' point of view of how it is to be bilingual and speaking both languages.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nayeli, and for sharing your like your story. And I will say, like, Nayeli and Nidia, who's also on in the room, both have there's another sister, sorry, I forget, um, the publishing company where you actually make and publish books that are bilingual, for bilingual kids. And so it's a great resource, I think, to have too. As time goes by and the more that I see develop, I think it's so cool that we we see a niche and something that is missing, and then we go ahead and we publish it, or publish books, or make resources available for other people to really support parents in their bilingual journey. And I think it's really cool that for example, you, Nayeli, and Nidia, through your books, um, uh, can do that, right? Because you share it directly with your kids, but at the same time, you're sharing with a huge community where, if we're talking about books for little kids, there's not a lot. of books available in Spanish, much less books that are bilingual. Usually it's the Spanish translation of a book in English, which is not necessarily always the best done. And so it's really cool to see original content and original work. So anyway, welcome to the stage. And I think I'm bringing Nydia up. Sorry, I called you out, but that wasn't, I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of the different resources that you have available, because it's just it's so important to have resources available to support you in your bilingual journey.
Can, can I just say my experience as far as trying to read some like books, like one of them was specifically for Cien Años de Soledad by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. He's like really like a world renowned like literature Nobel Prize winner. And like I know that's not like a children's book, it's more like for adults and stuff, but like reading it made me realize that I like how much Spanish I did not know. And because I literally like his adjectives, like it was just like off, it was like unreal. I said, like, oh my God, like I almost felt like wanting to take a Spanish class all over again because I was like, this guy's like his just like his the literature of the books like he writes is like insane. Like his vocabulary is like unreal, like really, really like wonderful vocabulary. Um, Definitions I had to look up all the time. So like definitely there's a lot of great authors. Isabel Allende, I think, is one of is it she's also another author, and I think I've seen her on Clubhouse too. Um I'm not sure. But anyway, I mean there's a lot of them. It's just it's very hard. Like for when I was trying to finish Cien Años de Soledad, I almost finished it and then I kind of got lazy and it took me forever. So I kind of cheated and I got the audiobook and I was like reading along with the audiobook because I felt like my mind was like drifting off, at some point because there was a lot of like repetition in the book. So like if anything, like you can always buy the audio, for a Spanish book or something, and that's definitely helpful too.
Oh my gosh, now that you mentioned audiobooks, okay, I'd like to kind of ask the people on stage, what are your views on audiobooks in Spanish? Like, is it yes, no? Is it something that you would never really approach or hadn't really thought about? Have you listened to any that have been really good? No, I'm getting dead silence. And I'm asking because I listen to a lot of audio books in English, but in Spanish I have found that there's not that many. Anyway, Nydia, did you want to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about yourself and your story, and see if people have any questions?
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you for this wonderful space. I think that raising bilingual children is important, not only just for them to build the capacity to learn different languages, but also just make them more, gain a world perspective and gain an understanding of how life or the world operates at a global scale. So that's important. And I think the tips that you're providing are essential because I think it is difficult to raise children uh, learning different languages. So just to facilitate that process, it's good to just, as you mentioned, reading, exposing them to different, for example, audiobooks, and it'll help them facilitate that process of learning different languages. And as you mentioned, I'm along with my sisters creating a books, bilingual books that will allow for multi generations to be able to connect to those books. For example, with bilingual books, we'll be able to provide that support to not only the children but also, for example, to abuelitos or to parents who want to be able to gain that experience of being proficient in both languages. So thank you for this incredible space.
Thanks so much. That was um, it's very, very cool. If you haven't had a chance to check out the Little Dreamers Publishing Company, I invite you to check out all of their books on Amazon. What I love is that they are delivered to Canada, which is always a plus. And so that's really, really cool. And I really have to admire the entrepreneurship mentality and the ambitiousness too, right? Of just saying, well, there's not that many books out there, so let's create our own. And I think that that's really so great. And that, like you said, this is going to be available for like generations to come, right? And when we talk about raising bilingual kids, we talk about, we're talking about first generation, second generation, but it's my hope, and I really, really hope that my girls will one day decide to raise their girls or their kids as bilingual too, right? And that the language will live on through the generations. Just because it's part of your identity, it's part of who you are. um, but also just because of all of the benefits that it comes with it. My daughter, the other day, Evelyn, the oldest one that's 5, she says, I don't. Oh, it was really funny actually. I showed her a video because I had gone to Mexico to a wedding, and she was listening to the video, and there were people talking in Spanish, and she looks at me and she says, "Why is everyone talking in Spanish?" And so it dawned on me, well, because we've never been to Mexico and we've been pretty isolated because of the pandemic here in Canada, she's never really heard more than 4 or 5 people in a room talk in Spanish, right? And so that's really been a very, very much a missed opportunity, I think, for us. But I mean, it's a pandemic. What are you going to do? Um, but very much an eye-opening moment too for me to say, okay, well, actually there's a whole bunch of other countries that speak Spanish, right? And it's way bigger than just you and I and here in this little house. Like there's a whole world out there that speaks Spanish, and you can talk to them if you speak the language too. Anyway, I digress with my stories, but I just wanted to share that with you guys. There was a question or here from Ileana, and she said, "Do you think music helps for a child that's almost 10? I'm the only one that speaks fluent Spanish in my household, but I listen a lot to bachata, salsa. I wish I would have pushed harder when my son was younger." Um, well, so and Antonio, I think, had some really good comments, and so thanks for providing those. Um, I mean, I personally think that it's never too late to reinforce a language, and so if you continue to hear and listen to music in Spanish, I think that's great, and then find, like, I feel with kids it's like you have to find what they're really into, right? What they really like. So if they really like Paw Patrol, so then maybe they'll watch the Paw Patrol in Spanish. Or if they really are into Legos, then maybe you can watch a YouTube video in Spanish on how to build something with Legos in Spanish. And so really trying to find the activity that the child likes and try to incorporate the Spanish there is a really good way to kind of like provide support. Anyway, that's kind of
And
like my opinion. I don't know, Dali, your kids are a little bit older. What do you think?
yeah, actually, I wanted to share about that because music has been very, very important in getting their, at least their ear trained to the language. So they might not understand every single word, but it's easier once they start looking up the words. It's easier for them to understand how to pronounce them, and then they can recognize it a lot easier. I read an article years ago that said that if you can learn, I think it was 300 words, just any words of any language, that you can pick up that language a lot easier. And there was another one that said that children before the age of 7, if they can, that they can pick up any language or multiple languages a lot easier, because at that, I guess, like the developmental stages of the brain, has something to do with it, but they're able to capture those sounds and be able to pronounce things a lot easier. Then after the age of 7, it becomes a little bit harder because by then, whatever they're trained to hear, or whatever language they're used to, they stick with that one more. So yeah, the younger the better. And me too, Liana. I can relate because I have guilt because when my kids were very little, they picked it up really well. They were speaking it. Then they started school. They got discouraged because we also have always, for the most part, lived in predominantly white areas where people don't speak. They're European or white or whatever you might want to call them, but they don't speak Spanish. So they also didn't have that opportunity to engage with other Spanish speakers and practice it. And then when they were teased at school about, the weird kid that spoke Spanish, then they didn't want to speak it. And then we moved to California and that changed everything and that reinvigorated everything because they were like, oh my gosh, aquí está nuestra gente. They're speaking Spanish. I need to speak Spanish. And that's how they started again. And of course, they haven't mastered it yet, but man, it makes such a big difference. And what they love here in La Casa is always la música, la cocina, because la comida, and um, games like loteria, stuff like that, whatever I can find that's in like from nuestra cultura, then we bring that into the house and we play it, and then grandma and their aunts partake in it, and it helps.
Those are such good tips, and I don't know, for me, like, very encouraging to hear, Dali, that that there is that there is a result at the end of this long marathon journey of parenting in two languages. And I hope that you found that helpful, to Ileana. um the sorry, the Spanish, music component, I think, is like so important. And I find too, just in taking a note, and we had mentioned this earlier about like the internet, just finding your virtual community of people that are going to support you in this bilingual journey is super important, right? So like getting the grandparents on board, or maybe getting the aunt or uncle or cousin that might not necessarily live nearby, or they might live in another country, on board to help too, to have weekly calls or weekly discussions. Like, I find getting those resources too are also important if it's not possible for you to travel to a location where the majority language will be Spanish. Miss, did you want to say something?
I was just about to say, well, one of the best, like some of the like most profound memories that I have are when I was a child and I was growing up, and we would always every year we would like, not every year, but pretty regularly we would go to Mexico, in el tiempo de las ferias. And so it was like, holiday time, and those were like the memories that stuck with me because everybody was like in a festive mood. People were like, having activities, and they were speaking the language and the food, and they were like bringing out the traditions, and they would have parties, and that's when you would learn like the norms of like, cómo se debe de portar una mujercita, esto y el otro, just little things, and it's like it kind of stays with you. It's really something that like helps kind of like mold you, and your personality and everything like that. So definitely recommend doing that. If and like, making friends that live there, and like you kind of like you're immersed in the culture. So yeah, it's even if you're older, I think even the older kids can appreciate that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think even as adults, we can appreciate that too, right? Like, as an adult, I went and lived in Peru for 6 months, and I know that it was really helpful for me and for my friend, in terms of like practicing the language. But definitely, it really does help you immerse yourself in the language when you have the opportunity to go and live there. Um, well, I realize that the time. I just want to make sure that if there's any other people, any other person in the room that would like to come up on stage and share a question or share their story, please feel free to do so. Now's the time to do so. And if not, that's okay. That's not a problem. I'll reset the room quickly, but the room will be ending at 11. Just because, like I said earlier, I'm old and I need to go to bed. But I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I'm really thankful for all of you to be joining this conversation today on raising first generation, second generation. For all of you that have shared your experiences and provided some insights and some input on how you can make that journey better. Thank you so much, whether you said that in the chat or whether you said it on stage. I really, really appreciate it. And I think that, that we'll continue to have these rooms probably two times a month. To be able to provide a platform for people to come and share their stories and share their questions, their frustrations, looking for tips and for best practices, and so on. As we're in the room, I really do encourage you to follow each other, either on Instagram or just here in the Clubhouse room, because clearly this is a topic that is of interest to all of us, and to look at the different profiles of people, and if you feel that their profile resonates with you, then feel free to follow them as well. Um,
May I
you
say
know,
something?
yes, of
Because
course.
I
Dali, go ahead.
because I think you're not gonna say it, so I'm gonna say it for you. Shameless plug here. But check out Alexa's books on Amazon. She has really cute ones. They're bilingual, and I think that they would be great for practicing also, and getting kids to just get into the language. And I just have a question, Alexa. Most of your books are, what age range are they for?
Thanks, Dali. You're right. I wasn't going to say it. So I have, there's an adult coloring book. So that one, it's not necessarily like bilingual, but they're basically for age ranges of 3 and plus. So the tracing book is, yeah, for between 3 and 5 years old. I will say, like, if your children are in that age where they're starting to write, um, uh, it can be my journal, it can be anyone's else's journal, but we've been doing the practice of gratitude journaling for a while now. We do 5 minutes of gratitude journaling every night, and it has been such a beautiful experience to just kind of sit down and talk with my daughters and say, like, what was the best part of the day, and to have them draw what it is. And so I have the gratitude journal available in English and in Spanish. But something that's been really cool is watching the evolution of your child as they started drawing what they were grateful for, and now being able to actually write it out. So I think that's something that's really, really cool. And I encourage you to practice that exercise if you can, and just watch that development, because it's so cool to watch how their little brains are actually, I say that they're smarter than we are, but they're just really, really, it's really, really neat to watch that. So anyway, thanks so much, Dali, for the plug there. If uh and I also invite you to have a look at some of the books that Nydia and her sisters have as well, because they have some really cool stuff there. And then the last plug that I'll make right before just closing up this room, make sure that you follow the Amigos Club, that you're part of the Amigos Club, because the rooms that they provide, the discussion topics are really, really great. And so I encourage you to do that. And I'll do one more plug here for for Dali. I really want to thank you, Dali, for encouraging me to take on this room, and for giving me the confidence of actually doing it. So thank you, and thank you for helping me moderate it. If you check out Dali's profile, just make sure to follow her on Instagram. The bullying, anti-bullying advice that she provides on her Instagram posts are like really, really amazing and really, really helpful, regardless of what age your child are. So I think that's gonna be it for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, and for joining this room. And I hope to see you guys in maybe 2 weeks to talk about more adventures in raising bilingual kids. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.